Welcome. Tonight I will tell you a story about life in a village at the foot of a volcano. Make yourself comfortable, save this video, and let it carry you gently into a peaceful sleep. Now, let us begin our journey. You wake to a roof that is more sky than ceiling, plaited palm and bamboo ribs, a thatch that sighs when the wind runs its hand across it. The night's fire is a faint red eye under 3 stones. Smoke from yesterday clings to the rafters like a shawl someone forgot to fold. Your bed is a woven mat on a platform of poles. It remembers the shape you made and lets it go reluctantly. Outside, the dark is the color of wet earth, and above it, higher than anything has a right to be, the volcano waits, a black triangle shouldered against the stars, a pale thread of steam unwinding from its crown, as if it were thinking out loud. The air tastes of wood smoke and something else, sharp, mineral, an egg note that belongs to stones rather than kitchens. Sulfur lives here the way salt lives by the sea. In your hair, on your tongue, in the tin cup that sits beside the door. When you lift the cup, the water is cool from a clay jar that sweats in the night air. It carries the faintest sweetness of ash, a reminder that even thirst is part of the mountain's economy. The house is a body and people are its breath. A grandmother's cough stitches itself into the last of the crickets. A child turns once in sleep and the mat answers with a small straw complaint. From the hearth, a woman coaxes coals awake with a bamboo tube. 2 soft puffs and a tremor of orange becomes a ribbon of flame. The kettle's lid ticks. A pot, black as a moonless pond, receives water and a handful of roasted maize or coffee grounds, whatever the hill allows this week. The smell is bitter and good. Outside the threshold, the ground is a firm callus of packed earth, tamped by bare feet and rain. The yard holds everything a day needs, a grindstone smooth as a hip, a coil of rope, half a dozen gourds strung from a crossbeam, a basket patching itself with new cane where the old wore through. Chickens consider the light with bright eyes. A dog lifts its head and drops it again. A low bed of cassava peels dries on a reed tray, pale crescents that will become flour. An old machete leans against the doorframe. Its handle is polished by work rather than sandpaper. Morning, when it comes level by level. First the roof silver, then the leaves. A rooster tries the new light. Another answers from the next yard. And then the hill owns the hour. Sound finds its instruments, pestle in mortar, thump, thump, thump. A broom whisking the doorstep, rubber sandals slapping a path, a girl's laugh cut brief because breath is for work. Far beneath it all, something enormous clears its throat. The boards under your feet tremble just enough to make you wonder if you imagined it. No one in the house looks up. That, more than the tremor, tells you where you are. The volcano is not a view. It is furniture, older than the language that named the plants in the garden. In the gray before sun, you see its history written in darker seams, ribs where old flows cooled into frozen rivers, pale scars where ash slides shaved the hillside bare, a notch where a lahar ran a generation ago and took the east path with it. Nearer, the village is built in the grammar of those facts. Roofs are weighted with stones against the winds that come from the mountainside. Doorways face the track that leads away from the riverbed. A low wall of basalt, every stone a different black, folds the goats in for the night. Someone has nailed a charm above a lintel, feathers and a twist of vine and a coin polished by too many thumbs. A shallow shelf near the door holds a daily offering, 3 grains of rice, a flower, a whisper. You cannot tell if it's for God or for the mountain. Here, the distinction may be polite rather than real. The family's breakfast is not ceremony but practice. Flat cakes of cassava dough hit the hot clay and rise by a thumb's breadth. Their surface freckles with ash the way snow freckles a sleeve. Plantain slices caramelize in a black pan with a spit of oil saved in a corked bottle. A mango becomes a hedgehog under a sharp knife and then a small sun in a wooden bowl. A pinch of salt, hoarded in a paper twist, turns everything into food. The children eat first, sitting on their heels, heads bowed not in prayer, but in appreciation. A boy saves his last piece, tucks it in a pocket, and is told with a glance to finish it now. Pockets are for stones, not for sweetness. Rats read pockets at night. Clothing is the mountain's dictionary. A wrap at the waist, a shirt the color of earth because soap is dear, a headscarf to keep ash from clinging to hair, a woven band that crosses a man's forehead and becomes a strap for a basket, the tump line letting his spine do the work his hands cannot. Feet are bare when they can be, sandals when they must. A girl ties a red thread around her little brother's wrist to make him visible to the ancestors. A man sharpens his machete with a slow patience that sets the whole day's tempo. Stroke, lift, test with thumb pad, nod. He does not scrape, he polishes. Noise wastes edges. Water is fetched before the sun declares its strength. The path to the spring is a ribbon scored into dark earth, the edges feathered with little ferns that collect ash and wear it like dusted sugar. The spring mouth breathes from a rock cleft, careful and constant. It smells faintly of eggs and the green of deep places. Women go in 2s and 3s, each with a clay jar on the hip or a blue plastic drum strapped to a frame whose straps have known many shoulders. They step over the channels the hill has written on itself to carry the rain away quickly when it comes hard. They measure with eyes what the night left in the barrel by the door and what the day will ask. Drinking, cooking, washing, the yam patch. They leave coins of water on plants growing near the spring for luck none of them would call luck. The fields are gardens stitched to the mountain's flank. Their soil is black with the generosity of old ash. Everything that takes root here feels like it's been invited. Banana leaves stand like green sails, big enough to fold lunch into. Maize lifts its tassels, the wind combs them, and the mountain catches the pollen with a sneer and a blessing. Sweet potato vines run like green handwriting, yams lie quietly, all their bragging saved for the day a shovel finds them. A boy learns to read the leaves not by color but by posture. This one thirsty, this one bored, this one sick with something the elders will know the name for, though the school does not. Between the fields, channels like scars tell stories about water, where it came roaring down once and turned soil to soup, where someone laid stones and convinced it to behave, where the village gave up a strip of land to an old river because arguing is expensive. In the low places, a dusting of pale grit shows where yesterday's ash fell like flour. Women bend and brush it off leaves with their hands because ash is a friend until it smothers. The ash clings to their fingers and lifts like fossil snow when they clap them together. Every few minutes, the mountain clears its throat again. Sound is not loud, it is particular. The dog twitches an ear toward it and then sleeps as if the noise were a kind of lullaby. The old man in the next yard pauses with his hands resting on the handle of a hoe, listening not with his ears but with his jaw. He nods, something he understands about the pitch, and plants his heel a little deeper to finish the furrow before the sun moves up another finger width. You flinch. No one else does. Your body does not yet know which tremors are news and which are weather. You notice the way the village keeps its go-bags without saying the words. A basket by the door with a coil of rope, a folded blanket, a pouch of cassava flour tied tight against mice, a gourd stopper scraped smooth so it can be opened one-handed, a small tin of matches, a family photograph in a plastic sleeve whose edges are sticky from heat. On the wall, a map drawn with charcoal and spit shows the paths that become roads when the mountain remembers its anger. Arrows away from the old riverbed, a cross on the high ridge where the elder says you must not stop, a circle in the flat place where, if the wind is wrong, smoke lies like cloth. The lines have been retraced so many times the soot has become a gloss. Children trace them with fingers the way other children trace letters. Practice here is not performance, it is survival. From the church on the far side of the square comes a wooden bell. Thunk, thunk, thunk. In another village it would be a call to prayer or to work. Here it is both and neither. It is the sound of a day starting. A little shrine under a breadfruit tree holds a bowl with 3 small fish carved from soft wood. A woman touches the bowl as she passes. Her fingers leave shiny trails on the dull paint. A man makes the sign he makes to the sky and then to the mountain and then to his chest. It is all one sign. In the school, which is also the meeting house, a line of children recites days of the week to a rhythm that fits the pestle in the mortar next door. A teacher's pointer taps time on a poster of a river that looks like any river and like none of theirs. Not far up the slope, a small pipe runs from a place where the mountain's bones bleed warm water. The pipe feeds a trough green with slippery life. People wash arms there, not bodies. They know the sign someone's grandmother told them. If the steam lies flat on the ground, go home. If it rises like breath on a cold morning, stand and watch until it decides what it wants. The ground around the trough is caked white with minerals, banded like a goat's horn. Children are told not to drink from the pipe. They do not. The dog knows better too. All of this happens quietly. That is what unsettles you more than the gurgle under your feet or the smell. You are used to alarm being loud. Here alarm is a glance at the sky, an ear turned to the ground, a hand counting jars. Loudness is for festivals and weddings and market days when the trucks come with sacks of rice, and the men argue in a cheerful way about prices, knowing that the mountain sets the real ones later with a single exhale. Someone offers you a cup, the bitter brew sweetened with a sliver of palm sugar that cheats the teeth, and a split cake of cassava, steam curling from its crumb. You thank them with a nod, because mouths are for eating in the morning. You try to swallow past the thumbprint of sulfur that sits at the back of your tongue. The heat that leaves the cup and enters your fingers tells you the day is willing to begin now, whether you are or not. From the edge of the yard, a path lifts toward fields that are already partway to sun. A woman with a basket on her back steps into it and disappears with the quiet of someone stepping behind a curtain. A man hefts his hoe and spits once thoughtfully into the dirt, a pact between saliva and soil, and follows her. A child carries a coil of banana leaves for wrapping lunch. His pride in this errand makes him walk a little wider than the path allows. A dog sighs and takes up his usual post in the shade of the low wall. A gecko scolds the day from the beam above the door. The volcano looks the same. You know it has changed. You think foolishly of weather apps, of push notifications, of sirens. The village thinks of the color of the steam and whether the wind is from the west, of last night's fall of ash measured in spoonfuls on the sill, of how many times the earth said ahem while the baby slept. They think of the last year the river ran thick and the year before that when it did not. They count rains and jars and mouths and call this counting good morning. You count tremors and call it fear. This is the first truth, and the mountain does not need to raise its voice to say it. You would not last a day in a village beneath the volcano, because even dawn here is a negotiation you don't yet know how to conduct. Breakfast is ration and ritual. Water is memory. Paths are promises already made to the hill. People read the ground and sky the way you read a screen. And they read you too by how you flinch when the boards lift and settle. The sun is not up yet, and already the place has asked you to pay attention with a kind of patience you don't carry in your pockets. Morning takes the village by the hand and sets it to work. The light climbed the slope in bands, first on the banana leaves, then the roofs, then the paths. Smoke rises thin and blue from a dozen hearths. It smells of damp wood, cassava peel, and the faint egg bite of sulfur that never really leaves. Roosters fence with their voices. Dogs choose doorways to guard by lying down in them. The mountain watches all of it with the same steady breath. The house breathes too. Mats are rolled and tied with palm string. The platform is swept with a twig broom that makes its own quiet rain on the floor. A grandmother places 3 grains of rice and a flower on the shelf by the door. She speaks a sentence that has no verbs and needs none. A boy shakes a calabash, dry beans inside, to wake his smaller sister, not with noise but with rhythm. The kettle's lid ticks again, a metronome for hands. Breakfast is a work break before work has begun. Cassava cakes, patted flat by practice, hit the hot clay and lift by a finger's width. The cook flips them with a stick that has known this job longer than the pan. Plantains brown in a little oil, saved in a bottle with a cork that has remembered more years than your phone has days. A pot of maize porridge goes from dull to bright with a pinch of salt and a finger of palm sugar shaved into it like a secret. Mugs, tin, enamel chipped to their iron bones, fill with bitter brew that remembers last year's harvest more fondly than this one. Children eat sitting on their heels. A boy tries to squirrel away his last slice and receives the look that means food in pockets leads to rats in beds. He eats it, smiling at the rule he lost to. Clothing finishes the sentences sleep began. A headscarf catches hair and ash in the same knot. A worn t-shirt goes under a woven vest because mornings can be tricksters. A man winds a tumbling across his forehead and tests the basket on his back with a shrug that says he knows exactly how much weight a day can take. The girl ties a red thread around her little brother's wrist again, because threads are a kind of memory, and memories keep small wrists safe. Feet are bare for now. Skin knows the path better than sandals, but a pair of rubber flip-flops rides the basket for when lava rock bites later. Before the sun declares its authority, water is fetched. The path to the spring is a dark ribbon, edges laced with little ferns powdered in ash like cake. A clay jar sweats on a woman's hip. A blue drum rides a bamboo frame on another back, thongs cutting old grooves into shoulder and chest that are not scars, more like letters written by work. At the cleft where the spring breathes, someone has set a gourd dipper on a peg. Hands rinse it with water before and after, a courtesy to the throat that will follow. The water smells green and a little egg-sharp. Children are taught with 2 sips, one to wet the mouth, one to swallow. The third is for the jar, not the tongue. Back at the yard, a different ledger runs. Jars counted with a fingertip down the clay, hens tallied with corn in the palm, matches shaken to hear how many conversations with fire are left. A gecko sits on the beam and marks lizard's attendance by not moving. A grandmother turns the windward face out on the drying tray of cassava peel. Ash lifts when she claps her hands and settles back as if it had changed its mind. The mountain clears its throat again, more a long ahem than any kind of roar. Boards lift and settle. A spoon hung in a glass by the door tings once, a watch without hands. No one stops. A man adjusts the map lines on the wall with a wet thumb. Charcoal turns to gloss where the path away from the riverbed crosses the ridge. Habit, not panic. It's the same impulse that makes villagers nail stones to roof edges and face doors toward the high path. Safety is a grammar here, not a sermon. People stream to the slope. The field tools look older than metal. Hoe, digging stick, machete with a handle polished into the shape of the hand that owns it. The soil takes them in like an old friend. It is black as coffee, gritty where young ash fell last night, soft where last season's leaves have become this season's hunger answered. Bananas stand like green sails, their midribs creak in the breeze. Maize tassels throw pollen that the wind combs. Each combing becomes a promise inside the silk. Sweet potato vines run like cursive. Yams hide without apology. A boy learns plant moods by posture, not color. Leaf edges curled with thirst, petiole angles that sulk, a jaunty stem that means the hill was kind during the night. He points, an elder glances and nods without words. The nod says, water that one first. Ash cleaning is a morning chore and a doctrine. It's light today, a flower dust on leaves. Hands brush it off the banana's great palm so stomata can do their secret math. The ash blooms in little puffs that make every wrinkle in the air visible. On maize, it stays for shade because even ash can do a kindness if asked properly. On the new tomatoes, a wet cloth works where fingers would bruise. The rule of thumb is older than thumb and older than rule, ash's friend until it is blanket. A channel cut last year after the short rains remembers its job. Stones laid in its throat convince water to walk politely when it comes down in sheets. Children play paper boats with banana rind in a trickle that isn't there, learning topography by pretending. A man checks the check dam with 2 palms flat. The mud feels tight. The stones hum a little under his weight. Good. On the far edge of the field, white crust flecks the soil like salt. Someone whistles through teeth and shakes a hand low. That spot stays dry until a hard rain comes. Sulphurous seep will bend plants bitter if you humor it with daily kindness now. Lunch is packed in leaves as big as faces. Steam rice or cassava cake cooled to logic. A sprinkle of dried fish fluff, a wedge of yam, chilies tucked into a corner for the brave and normal for everyone else. Banana leaves turn into green envelopes with 2 practiced folds. A thin vine becomes a tie that will not leak lunch into the dust. The bundles ride in the baskets up the path, stacked beside knives and spare shirt and a small jar of salt that can turn water into medicine when the sun argues too well. Women's work does not stay in the yard, it moves with the sun. At the washing place, where rocks make basins in the stream that could be a map of a hand, laundry slaps stone in a rhythm that sinks with pestles in mortars upslope and the church's wooden thunk. Soap is a luxury. Grated root does most of the labor, aided by ash water that knows how to persuade grease to let go. Clothes dry on bamboo poles, wind talking through them with a voice like pages turned. Children fetch sticks, guard chickens, play at sweeping ash trails from leaves with serious faces. One girl mends a basket with cane split from the chair she sits on. The chair has learned to be a store as well as a perch. The schoolhouse, a roof, 4 walls, a blackboard with a history of ghost lessons, takes in the morning after the fields have taken their due. The teacher's pointer beats time on a chart of rivers that all run left to right as if the world obliged. He adds a line with chalk and says, "When rain runs fast, you run high." And every head nods because this lesson is older than the poster and does not need letters. A shelf holds jars, one with a single feather to show wind's tricks, one with ash to be measured with a spoon each morning, one with water and a floating reed. If it ripples when feet cannot feel it, the floor learns to walk outside before people do. The children glance at the jars the way you glance at a sky through a window. Mid-morning, a truck arrives, moaning its way up the track with sacks of rice and a blue tarp that will become roofs in the next storm and sails for play in the meantime. Prices are announced in a voice that makes them sound friendlier than they are. Men haggle in the tone of friends on opposite teams. The last coin falls on the one thing no one planned to buy, and it is always the thing someone secretly needed most. On the way down, the truck carries baskets of plantains, piles of cassava, chickens trussed with rope shoulders, a bundle of broom grass tied with pride. Dust trails it like a question that never quite gets asked. At home, small economies continue. A woman counts matches by shaking. A man counts minutes by shadow on the threshold. The grandmother's shelf gets a new flower because you ask for what you need before the need arrives. A boy scrapes resin from the breadfruit bark and chews it into glue. It will mend a sandal thong and a toy boat both, and both will pretend they were never broken. A girl braids palm fiber into a cord that will tie the roof tighter to its stones. A cat decides which lap is the warmest tool for now. Every so often, the ground lifts and settles with all the inconvenience of a cat stepping across sleeping legs. A hanging spoon trembles against its glass. The dog opens one eye. The grandmother's thumb pauses on a rosary bead and moves on. Panic would be a waste here, not a virtue. Practice is the only coin the mountain accepts. Practice shows itself in the way jars are kept full, in the way children can shoulder a basket without stumbling, in the way a door can be barred against ash as neatly as against rain. You watch and learn the way visitors do, by noticing how no one announces what matters, they just do it again. By late morning, heat has its say. The ash, so light at dawn, now smells faintly like something being cooked in a kitchen you can't see. Sun sits on shoulders like a hand that doesn't need to push to be obeyed. Work shortens its strokes and lengthens its breaks. A broad leaf becomes a roof for a face. A hat soaked at the spring becomes an argument with noon and wins only enough to finish one more row. Water is not drunk, it is arranged. Wetting cloth, rinsing mouth, swallowing the last teaspoon when the tongue has listened to the first two without greed. Home for the midday hour is a tide coming in. Tools knock mud from their own blades on the hearth step. Sandals come off and carry the path's heat through the house like a smuggled sun. Lunch unwraps from green into steam. Rice brightened with a wedge of mango that fell in the night. Fish that tasted the river at dawn. Cassava that tastes the field at dusk. Chilies that taste like a dare. The youngest gets the thickest piece of plantain. The oldest gets the bowl first. The mountain says nothing. The boards say very little. The spoon in the glass says not now. You do the village work of sitting without spending. Back against a post, knees uncomplaining, hands quiet, eyes learning the economy of shade. It is a kind of job too. Across the yard, a neighbor mends a roof from a ladder that is more memory than wood. He ties the new palm fronds down with cord that was something else last week. He hums only the parts of the song that fall under breath. The tune wanders through the leaves and forgets itself there in a way that makes the afternoon gentler than it would have been. The sun tilts. The hour for returning to the slope arrives again. The second shift that is really the same shift with a different light. Baskets are shouldered. The red thread is retied. The spoon in the glass is still. The grandmother places another flower on the shelf and adds a pinch of ash to the bowl, because ash is part of every bargain here. A dog stretches long enough to remind its bones of their names, then takes its place behind the heels it trusts. And here is the second truth, offered without drama by a morning that was nothing but chores. You would not last a day in a village beneath the volcano because even the calm hours are braided with rules you don't yet carry. Water before talk. Ash off leaves, but not all leaves. Doors face toward high paths. Lunch in leaves tied so it won't leak into dust. A spoon in a glass for news the ground keeps. practice instead of panic. You can learn it perhaps, but not by noon. And noon is already standing in the doorway, asking what you've brought to pay with. The path climbs in switchbacks a goat would respect, thin as a wrist where rain has taken its tithe and quick to crumble under an impatient heel. The basket on your back rides from a band across your forehead. Your spine does the arithmetic your shoulders once tried to carry and failed. A dog goes ahead and behind by turns, reconnoitering anthills, gossiping with smells, choosing the right patch of shade for later as if shade were a tool you could set aside and pick up. Fields here are not rectangles but sentences written along the mountain's grammar, curves that follow the slope's breath, terraces held in the lap of old stone. The soil is black in a way that swallows light and returns it as growth. Last year's ash still has opinions and speaks in grit under your nails. Banana leaves stand like green sails, their midribs creaking in the small wind. Maize lifts tassels that dust the air with promises. Climbing beans braid themselves around corn the way children hold ankles when they don't want to be left behind. Sweet potato vines write cursive between the bigger letters. Yams are not visible. They are facts underfoot that the elders can see without digging. Work starts in the low voice of tools. Hoes bite and release with a rhythm that makes breath remember itself. Cut, draw back, crumble the clod with a flicking twist. Digging sticks test the ground and frown. Here is root, here is stone, here is a place where last night's ash lay too thick and needs brushing off so the leaves underneath can keep their secret math of light and water. Machetes are not waved. They are argued with the way you argue with string, neat and close. Weeds are not enemies. They are neighbors asked to move house politely. Roots lifted intact when it can be done so they don't come back angrier. Nothing is measured by clocks. Progress is counted in rows before the sun reaches a certain rock, in how many baskets of mulch can be walked to the far banana patch before the church's wooden bell sounds once for noon. Shadows are rulers and metronomes. When the dog shifts to a new strip of shade, everyone glances without moving their faces. When a cloud crosses, hoes speed up for that brief generosity as if borrowing coolness on interest. Mulch is a harvest of its own, shredded banana sheaths, dry grasses, the brittle lace of last season's bean vines. Piled in a ring around a maize stem, it keeps the soil from forgetting how to be wet. Laid along a contour, it persuades rain to walk instead of run. A boy brings armfuls in leaves big enough to be capes. His pride makes him too wide for the footpath, and a hand reaches from nowhere to turn his shoulders without a word, like guiding a boat away from a rock everyone knows. Water here is handled the way you handle fire, with respect and patience. Bamboo poles split and carved into gutters sleep along the edge of a terrace, ready to wake if a cloud decides to be generous. A gourd with 3 pierced holes becomes a drip that feeds a root ball while you weed 3 rows away. A woman sets 2 jaws in the shade of a rock to catch the day's slow exhale. By sunset there will be a mouthful in each, enough to soften a cloth for wiping ash from tomato leaves that hate dust in their throats. You learn a trick. Wet your scarf, wring it to stinginess and drape it across the back of your neck under the headcloth, coolth you carry without spending water twice. Pests exist, but drama does not. A boy patters along the edge with a string of rattling shells. Birds reconsider maize for more sophisticated meals. A child waves a palm frond at the bean tips where a shimmer of aphids has settled like pepper. A woman brings a clay bottle that smells of garlic, chili, and a little soap. She mists and moves on, a weather system the hill recognizes and accepts. Near the taro patch, a line of ant jars, brown clay sunk to the rim, has trapped 5 marauders drunk on sweetness. The jars are emptied and reset with a smear of palm sugar to negotiate again tomorrow. Smoke pots, half-buried tins fed with damp leaves, send a kindly haze through the bed that has chosen to be irresistible to beetles. The pots sigh and do their work without boasting. Compost is a quiet kitchen behind the kitchen. In a corner of the upper terrace, a pit receives peelings, husks, last week's weeds, a scoop of ash, a handful of charcoal dust saved from the hearth, a pour of rinse water turned dark from the pot. Boy turns it with a fork that is all tines and no pretense. The smell is not rot, but the forest at night after rain. This is biochar and habit disguised as a heap. By planting time, it will be the thing the soil wears like a necklace. Hazard is small and near before it is large and far. Lava rock that looks smooth from above takes the skin off a heel if you step thoughtlessly. A man stops, washes the cut with water that could have been a mouthful, rubs crushed guava leaves into it, green antiseptic that stings like good advice, presses ash on to dry it, and bandages with a strip of banana leaf tied with a grass twist. He steps differently the rest of the morning and forgets to complain. A fissure, a hand's breadth across, runs through a corner of the field where ferns grow too well. The soil there is warm even in early light. A stick tests its edges. A small rock is dropped and takes longer to say yes than you like. A girl plants 3 stones at its lip to make the place visible to feet that will be thinking about lunch later. The stones are not warning so much as punctuation. Every so often the mountain clears its throat. It is not a roar. It is a single syllable that lifts the hair on your arm and then smooths it again. Dust swirls along the path as if someone were sweeping where there is no broom. A spoon hanging in a glass at the house you can see from the field will be trembling now. The grandmother will touch it without looking up. A pad of steam unrolls from the crown like a scarf taken off. No one stops. They adjust. A woman turns the mouth of a jar inward. A man flips a basket so its hollow face is down. A child lays a flat rock over a shallow basin where chickens drink. It is the same movement people make when rain darkens leaves but does not yet fall. Readiness, not fear. Work travels up and down the slope in exchanges that have their own accounts. Your row becomes your neighbor's row after lunch, and you become the neighbor's neighbor on a different terrace tomorrow. The word for this trade is different in every valley. Its meaning is always the same. We will finish yours as if it were ours, and ours as if it were yours, because the mountain does not have a calendar and prefers surprise. A joke walks with a hoe and comes back with a basket. A bundle of plantains changes hands with the weight of gratitude and appears sliced and fried in someone else's pan at dusk with the weight of custom. Heat builds like a polite debt. Scarves tighten over mouths not to be dramatic but to be smart. Ash rises easily under a careless foot. You learn to set your heel down like a word you intend to keep. The good wind is from the ocean. The bad is from the mountain's side. An elder holds a feather between finger and thumb and watches its grammar. Standing, it's a noontide drift. Leaning west, a kindness. Leaning east, a thoughtfulness about jars and doors and whether the children should practice the high path home just because practice should sometimes happen when it feels silly. Lunch is eaten in the field because to go home would be to spend the shade twice. Banana leaves unwrap into steam and salt. A wedge of yam smiles under a ribbon of chili. Cassava reveals its mild heart. A twist of dried fish can turn the tongue serious if it needs reminding. The youngest eats first because their bodies are still negotiating terms with the mountain. A mouthful of water is counted out loud. 1 sip to wet, 1 to swallow, 1 to bless the scarf, and the jar goes back into the shadow at the terrace wall like a small animal told to sleep. Someone leaves 3 grains of rice on the low stone at the field's edge. You cannot tell if it is for God or for the mountain. The stone does not argue. After lunch, work shifts its posture rather than its pace. Hoes cut shorter strokes, wrists save steps by asking ankles to do more. Hands brush ash from banana leaves with a tenderness usually reserved for faces. The plants answer by shining. A boy runs a thumb across a maize leaf and tastes it. He announces to no one in particular that the sulfur is less today than yesterday. News you do not know how to receive except with relief you haven't earned. A woman checks the tomato stakes and slides ties made from banana fiber up as the stems argue their way toward future soups. A man leans into a shovel with the weight of a person who has learned the difference between digging and making a place for water to think. He deepens a swale by a hand width, paces its curve, nods when it mirrors the hill's sigh. On a high shelf of the slope, the air is sharper. Coffee shrubs live under a sift of shade trees because coffee prefers stories to sunburn. Red cherries pop into a woven basket with a sound like seeds confessing. Hands find only the ones that have decided to be sweet. Smell is more honest than color. The pickers laugh quietly when you trust your eyes first and return with handfuls that will scold your tongue later. A woman spreads beans on a mat near the path where the wind will bother them into drying. She tucks the mat's edge under stones so a whisper from the mountain won't enroll tomorrow's drinks into today's air. The fumarole place is a lesson everyone learns early. The ground goes white and yellow and crusted near a seam that breathes. Children are told not to jump. Adults do not jump either. A stick tests, a hand hovers. You step around the places where the earth is rumored to boil if insulted. Sometimes, on market days, eggs get set on a vent to cook for laughs and for trade. Today there are no eggs for jokes. A patch of weeds that loves heat and the taste of minerals turns a greedy green there. Someone scowls at it and pulls it by the root because the fumarole is a law, not a field. Birds risk the edge where forest leans toward field. Boys become scarecrows with voices and hats. They spin rattles made from dried gourds full of pebbles. They recite the names of wells and ridges in sing-song as if calling roll for the hill. A string glitters where children have tied bits of foil from a festival to keep the banana hearts from becoming a parrot's discussion. A kite tilts and reconsiders. The beans breathe easier. Injury is folded into work like rest. A splinter of hard grass under a fingernail is solved with a sliver of thorn and a mother's mouth, quick and certain. A blister at the thumb pad announces itself and is greeted with a wrap of fibrous bark that turns the handle into a softer idea. A back says a word and gets an answer. 2 breaths, a longer shadow. A hoe carried on the shoulder for 50 steps, so the strap marks on the forehead can fade to a lighter letter. Mid-afternoon, the mountain speaks a shade lower. You don't hear it first. You feel it in the way beans pause and banana leaves hush. The dog sits up, listens with its whole back, then lies down again as if correcting someone else's panic. The spoon at the house tinged earlier, now it is silent. This is what normal sounds like when normal lives beside a thing that can become story in one exhale. Practice again. Jars turned inward, lids on pots, a glance at the sky. The work goes on with 2% more attention and 2% fewer jokes. By the time the church's wooden thunk counts noon, late on purpose, giving people time to finish rows they promised themselves, feet have mapped the terrace edges in new memory. The basket straps have learned your bones and now teach them instead. The sun leans. A breeze with ocean on its breath reaches the field and pulls a little of the day's weight off your neck. Someone says enough in a voice that carries and does not need to be loud. Tools are planted in soft soil, blade down, like questions waiting for tomorrow's answer. On the way down, burdens cross, full baskets passing empty ones, talk passing in packets small enough not to waste air. A boy with a bundle of broom grass accepts a palm across his head, half blessing, half affection. A girl with a spray bottle of chili garlic soap holds it up triumphantly. The brass nozzle catches light and pretends briefly to be gold. A neighbor hands your family a bunch of plantains with one hand and takes your mother's old repair knife with the other. Debts are tallied in bananas and tools and will be evened without arithmetic. You feel the kind of tired that good work sells a satisfaction and your body tries to buy on credit. Your palms are smarting where the handle raised its old argument. Ash has written pale commas along the sweat at your temples. The egg bite of sulfur is fainter this hour, traded for the garden's green breath and something sweet you can't name. Guava, maybe, or the clean paste of cassava drying on its tray. You think, briefly and stupidly, that you have learned a day, and the mountain, which has not even spoken in its big voice, raises an eyebrow you cannot see. This is the third truth, written in soil and breath instead of ink. You would not last a day in a village beneath the volcano because the fields ask for 2 kinds of strength at once, muscle for the black earth and attention for the hill's moods. Every row you finish is also a question you have to keep answering without raising your head. How is the wind? What does the spoon say? Is Ash a friend here or a blanket today? Where will water run if it gets ideas? People here carry those answers like tools. You carry a basket and a hope that the mountain won't collect on its old debts before evening. Afternoon loosens the tight knot of noon and lets breath come back in full lengths. Paths unspool from the terraces and gather people the way streams gather fallen leaves. You walk home at the village's pace, neither quick nor slow, but exact, following backs that know every dip and stone. The basket rides from the band across your brow. When you take it off, your spine keeps the shape for a heartbeat and then remembers itself. Ash writes a pale history on shoulders and forearms. When you clap your hands, it rises in a little ghost and settles again as if choosing you twice. At the threshold, a shallow basin waits. Feet enter it without ceremony. The water turns from clear to tea color in one tilt. A girl empties it onto the hibiscus bush that guards the corner, and the plant drinks the field story as if it were rain. A twig broom persuades the day's dust out of the house the way a hand smooths hair from a sleeping child's brow. The floor is not spotless, it is respectful. Tools lean blade down along the wall, each to its place like letters in an alphabet. Handles, darkened where fingers always fall, get rubbed with a thumbful of ash and a breath of oil from a bottle that has outlived 3 corks. Nicks at a machete's edge are not attacked, they are courted. A flat stone and a wet palm do the slow work. Circle, lift, testing with a thumb pad that knows where sharp ends and foolish begins. A boy brings a length of vine. His father shows him the knot that holds nets and roofs and sometimes tempers. The knot remembers better than most men do. Inside, the hearth clears its throat. Coals banked at dawn, except 2 twigs, then 3, then the thin split of a palm rib. A woman breathes through a bamboo tube, short puffs that wake a ribbon of flame. The black pot, which is never scrubbed to newness and therefore never betrays a stew, takes water. Yam moons slip down its sides, then sliced cassava, then a handful of greens that have more strength than taste until they meet salt. Fish from the morning, scaled at the river stone by stone, smokes on flat basalt warmed beside the fire's mouth. The air learns the recipe before the tongue does. The yard reorders itself for the soft hours. A mat rolls out under the eaves. Its edges have been mended so often they are more repair than original. A grandmother sits there with a pile of shirts and a needle the length of her smallest finger. Her thread is pulled from unraveling cloth. She knots it with spit and a prayer without verbs. The holes she closes are not accidents, they are chapters. A girl sits cross-legged and splits cane with a knife that wears a wooden bandage. The cane becomes ribs. The ribs remember a basket. The basket remembers weight and responds by growing a new side. Laundry comes back from the trough with rock marks and river talk still in it. Shirts go onto a rope tied from post to post. The rope hums in the small wind, and the shirts answer by leaning together like conspirators. On the rope's far end, a bundle of plantain peels dangles to dry. When they are leathery, they will become fire's first story tomorrow morning. A boy tramps the yard, counting chickens like coins in a pocket, lips moving. 1, 2, 2 again. The broody hen, 3 with the torn comb, 4 who bites, 5 who hides behind the mortar. He reports to his grandmother, who tallies against a ledger kept under her tongue. The square fills by degrees as shadows lengthen. Men carry nets to the shade of the breadfruit tree and teach them to be nets again where the cords forgot. A gourd rattle filled with seeds becomes a pestle's metronome. The mortar rings when struck just right, and everyone hears the time without looking at the sky. A trader's top, blue as the idea of the sea, lies folded. A woman cuts 2 strips from its frayed edge to make ties and a promise for the roof if the wind remembers its teeth next month. Children herd smaller children by inventing errands. Fetch the red jar. Carry this leaf to the step. Find the dog's shadow. The errands have no purpose but to teach purpose. The truck that came at mid-morning has gone, taking baskets of plantain and bundles of broomgrass, leaving behind a sack of rice that sits in the schoolhouse like a guest of honor. The teacher chalks a mark beside the line of ash measurements. Today only a spoon's hollow, steady as breath. He taps the board once, hard enough to scold the chalk dust into the air. The children look up, not because of fear, but because a tap is a word in their language. Notice. Near the shrine under the breadfruit, 3 fish carved from soft wood watch the square. Their paint has been polished to shine by too many thumbs. A woman passing leaves a coin and repositions a feather so it faces the slope and not the road. Somewhere an elder always notices when the feather is wrong and always puts it right, even if no one saw the wrongness happen. A small shelf near your door receives 3 grains of rice and a yellow flower. The gesture is as brief as a blink and as binding as a promise. Animals settle themselves by habit that looks like wisdom. Goats nose the basalt wall, choose the leeward side, and make a single sound that could be complaint or contentment. The dog lies in the doorway so that one ear keeps the lane and one ear keeps the house. He moves only when the pot lid ticks a certain way that means bone. Geckos appear like punctuation on the rafters. They will edit the moths later. The stew grows serious. It thickens on its own time. Impatience only makes it argue. Plantain slices slide into a pan with a breath of oil poured from a bottle with a cork that looks like it has survived 3 lives. Their edges go from soft gold to a brown that tells the nose the right story. A pinch of salt changes the tale's ending from good to better. A calabash of maize porridge goes from grey to shining when a spoonful of palm sugar shaves into it like a secret. A grandmother tastes with a spoon that never leaves the house and flicks 2 drops onto the hearth. 1 for luck, 1 to teach the fire manners. Work does not stop, it becomes fine-grained. A man strips palm fiber and twists it thigh against palm into rope that will hold the roof when the wind pronounces a long sentence. Another cuts a spoon from wood so fresh it still remembers sap. Curls gather at his feet like fingernails. A woman counts matches by ear. 1 shake, 2 shakes. The rattle tells her how many conversations with flame remain. She nods to herself, moves a small rock from one side of the shelf to the other. The house understands the note better than you do. The volcano breathes a syllable from far up under the words of the evening. Dust in a sunbeam turns to confetti and falls. A spoon hanging in a glass answers with a single bright ping that has nothing to do with fear and everything to do with grammar. Doors that face the high path are already cracked, so they swing clean if a hand must be full. Jars on the floor are turned so their mouths face the wall. A child pauses at play to lay a flat stone over the chicken's shallow dish, so it won't fill with powder if the mountain decides to shed a thought. Practice here is stitched into play with invisible thread. Dusk arrives not on the horizon but in the hands. Someone lights a resin torch. Its smoke smells of green medicine and pine history. Someone else lifts a lamp and checks the wick as if it were a pulse. The square's noise narrows to the width of paths. The paths narrow to the width of doorways. The church's wooden bell gives 3 honest thunks, neither command nor invitation, only acknowledgement. The reed pipe begins somewhere up lane, a simple melody with space between the notes where birds used to be and will be again tomorrow. The meal is not served, it is shared. Bowls circle clockwise, then back again when small hands misjudge capacity. The youngest eats first, porridge like velvet, plantain that breaks with a sigh, a flake of fish dipped in broth to make it belong to the same sentence. The oldest gets the piece with the most skin. Everyone pretends it is not because of the skin. Salt is a pinch, not a habit. Sugar is a shaving, not a rule. A boy puts his last slice into his pocket out of reflex and meets the look that turns pockets into plates. He eats it where it belongs. Rats' red pockets, the proverb has teeth. Afterward, water is not wasted on the floor. It is escorted outside to the base of a banana with soil for thirst. The pot is rinsed, the rinse kept for the first washing of hands. The second washing uses clean water. The third, the precious one, goes into a jar covered with a cloth whose weave is tight enough to keep ash a rumor. A girl strains drinking water through layered cloth and charcoal saved from last month's fire. Nothing in this house knows only one job. The square relaxes into the kind of idleness that is a tool for tomorrow. A game of drafts begins on a board cut from an old crate. Beans and shells learn to be kings. 2 men plait a fence repair while telling a story that keeps its teeth sheathed. The lahar that ran before the teacher's father was born. How it changed the path's shape the way a word can shift a sentence. Children listen from a distance that looks careless and is not. A mother rubs a heel with crushed guava leaves and ash. The sting is the medicine proving its honesty. The patient walks differently and does not speak of it. Pain here is a memo, not a meeting. A breeze walks down from the ridge with ocean on its breath. Shirts on the line turn their faces into it and close their eyes. A feather on the shelf says the wind is kind. The smell of sulfur, the village's permanent punctuation, is smaller now and farther away, like a memory at the back of the tongue you could name if asked, but won't be tonight. Smoke rises in thin blue drafts from a dozen hearths, threads that meet somewhere above the square and twist into rope, a rope that ties the village to itself. A grandmother takes out a small packet, unfolds it twice, and finds within a twist of red thread. She reties a boy's wrist, not because the knot failed, but because attention is a kind of food. She touches the girl's braid where the palm fiber binding has stretched, retwists, reties. The braid sits up straighter and behaves. She looks at the door, at the go basket beside it. Rope, blanket, cassava flour in a pouch, gourd stopper worn smooth, tin of matches, folded photograph. Then sets a palm on the lid and leaves it there for the length of one breath. Nothing is wrong, everything is ready. You find that evening here does not hurry toward night, it plane weaves it. Threads go over and under, mending and talk, food and counting, laughing and the small silences in which dogs change sides and geckos claim moths in soft clicks. Someone hums half a song, someone else picks up the second half by accident and makes it fit. The mountain clears its throat once, low, the spoon is quiet. In the schoolhouse, a jar's floating reed doesn't move. Calm is not a blanket, it is a net, holes and knots both doing their jobs. When full dark begins to gather its corners, lights shrink themselves out of politeness. Resin torches gutter and are pinched. Lamps turn their wicks low enough that glass remembers stars. The square gives back the people it has held all day. Doorways accept them without questions. A last basin is poured onto soil. A last pot is faced downward. A last check of the map's charcoal lines adds a thumb's gloss where the ridge turns. A grandmother lays 3 grains of rice and a flower on the shelf again, bookending the day with the same quiet transaction. And if you are paying attention, you feel how the house changes temperature around you, the way a body does, finding an inside weather. The floor has the coolness of clay that argued with sun and won by standing still. The roof breathes. You can hear the thatch answer the wind with a sound like night water. The dog rearranges himself to keep one eye on the world and one on your sleep. The volcano is where it was this morning, which is to say, everywhere and far away. It has not spoken in its big voice today. No one thanks it aloud. Gratitude here is a closed door, a full jar, a tool put back blade down, a red thread retied. You lie down on the mat and it learns you again. The smell in your hair is smoke and green and a sweetness that might be mango or might be the starch of cassava drying on its tray. Your palms carry the day's arithmetic, handle, rope, stone, leaf, and slowly forget it. Outside, a gecko punctuates a line and then another. Far off, something large says a syllable deep in the ground and does not repeat it. The spoon in the glass does not answer. Evening has finished its work. Night will come and do its own, but for now the village balances like a bowl carried on a head, level, practiced, beautiful, because it refuses to make a drama out of skill. You breathe, and the hill keeps the other half for you, as it did this morning and will again tomorrow. Evening folds into night with the patience of someone folding cloth they expect to use again tomorrow. The last light slips from the terraces. Banana leaves turn black against a sky that still holds a streak of fire. The volcano, silhouetted, seems taller in darkness than it ever does by day. A thin column of steam rises, brighter than the dusk, white against indigo, a thought too large to name. In the square, firelight pushes back shadows only as far as it can, and then gives up. People accept the compromise. A circle of men squat on their heels around a clay pot of broth, trading stories in voices so low they sound like additional flames. Women sit nearby, hands busy even after the meal, mending, braiding, tying knots for tomorrow's bundles. Children chase each other until the fire is the only border they respect. Then they collapse in heaps, laughing into each other's shoulders, already half asleep. The air smells of wood smoke and the faint metallic bite of sulfur. It is never absent, only closer or farther, stronger or weaker. Tonight it is strong enough to scratch the back of your throat. A grandmother coughs twice and continues her story without pause. No one remarks on the smell. To name it would be to invite it closer. Instead, they watch the sparks drift upward, carrying prayers without words. Every so often the ground stirs. Not violently, no shouts, no collapses, but with the steady pulse of something enormous shifting its weight. A spoon resting in a clay cup shivers against the rim. A dog lifts its head, ears turning, then sighs and lays it down again. The people do not stop their weaving, their murmurs, their eating. They know the mountain is awake. They know it always is. Panic is for strangers. Habit is for survival. Old men recall earlier nights when the ground spoke louder. They describe rivers of fire that ran where maize fields stand now, a night when the air itself burned the lungs, when the river boiled and fish floated white-bellied at dawn. Their voices are calm, but their eyes wander to the younger ones, making sure the story is received as warning, not decoration. Children lean forward, their faces orange in the firelight. They have heard the tale before, will hear it again, until one day they will be the ones telling it, their voices just as measured. A girl lays 3 grains of rice on a flat stone near the fire. She whispers something you cannot catch. Her grandmother touches her shoulder and nods. No one laughs. Offerings are not about belief. They are about respect, about reminding the mountain that people know their place. A bowl of cassava flour sits on a ledge near the door of every house. A rope and blanket lie in a basket. No one speaks of preparing, they simply live ready. The night deepens. Stars scatter above, more than you can hold in thought, but no one stares upward for long. Eyes stay low, on soil and children, on animals, on the narrow path that leads upward and downward. Above, the volcano watches, steam weaving a veil in the starlight. Below, the village watches back in silence. It is not fear, not quite reverence. It is acknowledgement. 2 neighbors who will never move away from each other, bound by agreements older than memory. Here is the 5th truth, whispered in the rustle of palm fronds, in the scrape of a pestle on stone, in the cough of the earth under your feet. You would not last a day in a village beneath the volcano because you expect danger to announce itself with trumpets and alarms. Here it announces itself with a twitch of ash on a windowsill, with a change in the smell of water, with a tremor so small it barely rattles the bowls. The villagers do not panic, they read. And in their reading they survive. The last edge of sun slips behind the ridge and the day exhales long and even. Smoke from a dozen hearths rises in thin blue cords and plats itself above the square. The knots of cooking smells are easy to read. Fish on hot stones, plantain in shallow oil, cassava steaming under a lid that clicks when the bubbles are too eager. Someone cracks a pinch of salt between finger and thumb as if waking it. A child brings the water gourd with both hands, walking wide to keep the surface from lapping over. The stripe of wet on his forearm dries as he sets it down beside the fire like a guest. Bowls come forward that have known many soups. A grandmother ladles stew with the steadiness of someone who understands where fairness lives. One ladle bright with greens, one with yam, one with the fish that fell apart just right. Cassava moons are lifted with a stick that has learned balance. Plantains slide from pan to leaf with a sigh. Nothing is piled high. Plenty here is built in loops. This bowl now, yours next, then mine, so that hunger and patience meet halfway and recognize each other. They do not sit down to dinner, they fold themselves into it. The youngest squat in a crescent near the cook, bowls nested in palms, breath making fog on hot porridge. The oldest take the outside places, facing the paths as if conversation might come from the dark and need seating. A dog chooses the doorway, eyes on the floor, not the hands. He has learned where generosity drops crumbs. A boy tries again to tuck a last slice away in his pocket and catches the look that turns mischief into lesson. He eats, grinning, the pocket learns too. The square fills the way a song fills a room. First one family's voices, then another's, then the few who ate earlier and came for the talking. A pot turned upside down becomes a drum. A bundle of broom grass, shaken, becomes a hushmaker for laughing children. The pestle in the mortar keeps time against its rim. Thunk, thunk, thunk. Not to grind anything now, just to remind the air of rhythm. An old reed pipe remembers a tune from before the last big rains and lets it out again, with the notes spaced far apart so the day can step between them without tripping. Stories start small. Someone tells the joke about the goat that chose the windward side and learned respect. The chuckle travels like a lizard along a wall, quick, light, gone. A woman remembers aloud the year the ash fell thick as flour and made bread rise like it had dreams. She holds up 2 fingers to show exactly how much ash a leaf can carry before it forgets how to breathe. The children listen with the half ear of the already fed, their other ear trained on the night the way the dog's is, ready to notice without being invited. The volcano clears its throat once low. Dust on a windowsill lifts and settles. A spoon in a glass answers with a single bright ping, then is still. Hands move without hurry. The mouths of jars turn toward the wall. The chicken's shallow basin shaded with a flat stone. A door left unlatched so it can open cleanly if a full basket has to pass quickly. No one speaks the word for danger. The village prefers grammar to exclamation. After bowls travel twice around the circle, the work of food becomes the work of after-food. Rinse water is poured slowly over hands and saved in a smaller pot for the first wash of pans. A girl strains drinking water through cloth layered over charcoal from last month's fire. The cloth goes on a line to dry, the charcoal back into its jar. A man oils a knife with 1 drop that knows 10 jobs. A grandmother ties a red thread again around a thin wrist, not because it loosened, but because attention is something you feed. Baskets migrate to laps. Cane splits under quiet blades. Strips turn to ribs, ribs to walls, walls to a promise of carrying. A net is mended under the breadfruit tree. The knot a boy learned in the afternoon becomes 10 knots in the evening, then a habit he will not be able to forget even if he migrates to a city with no fish. 2 older men sit knee to knee, knives in hand, shaving spoons from wood that still smells like sap. Curls fall onto a leaf with the satisfaction of a job that makes shavings the way a story makes silence. Someone pushes a brazier to the square's edge and feeds it damp leaves. The smoke is deliberate, a small gray curtain to persuade biting insects to try their luck elsewhere. Children make circles through it, emerging smelling like green medicine and laughing at the way the world blurs and then returns. One child coughs. A grandmother notes the sound with her eyes, the way she notes the color of steam by day, and nothing more. Not everything requires a meeting. Singing begins the way a path begins, where feet have always passed. A woman takes a line the length of a breath. Others braid their lines to it. The song has only 3 notes, and the words are shorter than their meanings. It names water, wind, soil, and the way a roof answers weather. It does not name the mountain, it does not need to. The pipe falls in under the voices like a post under a beam. Children learn the refrain by stepping, not by memorizing. The beat is a thing you carry in your calves here. The teacher, who counted ash with a spoon in the morning, counts stars with a finger now. He points along the spine of the night where 3 bright points sit like beads on a string, and tells the small ones that when those beads move to the ridge, the short rains come. An older child whispers that the string is a fishbone and gets a laugh he earns. Farther back, 2 women trade recipes that are really harvest tallies. How much salt was left last week, how the beans liked the shade cloth, whether the coffee dried faster by the path or on the roof. These are not secrets, but they are quietly held. On the shrine shelf, the carved fish look toward the slope because earlier an elder turned them that way. Someone places 3 grains of rice and a yellow flower, the same as at dawn, and just as brief. A man touches the coin nailed above his lintel as he passes his door, not for luck, but to remind the coin it has a job. Inside, the go basket waits with its rope, blanket, tight pouch of cassava flour, tin of matches, smooth gourd stopper, the photograph in its cloudy sleeve. No one practices leaving tonight. Practicing is still part of staying. A breeze with ocean on its breath crosses the square and makes 100 small things agree. Shirts on lines find the same angle, flames lean, hair lifts under headscarves, the feather on a shelf lies flat and kind. The sulfur taste, the permanent punctuation here, shrinks to a comma at the tongue's edge. Somewhere upslope the fumarole place sighs, no one goes there now. That is a daylight law. By and by the singing softens, the drum becomes a heartbeat, the pestle falls silent. The last bowls are washed, the last basin is tipped at the foot of a banana, the last ember is tucked into ash the way you tuck a child, so it will wake easily and in a good mood. A man walks the fence with a small lamp, not to see intruders, but to show the goats that the fence still believes in itself. A cat decides which doorway is the warmest and occupies it without paying rent. Lighting shrinks itself out of courtesy. Torches gutter, are pinched, and laid with their black mouths outward. Lamps keep their wicks low enough that their glass remembers stars. In houses, cloths are hung over door frames to teach ash manners. Mats are unrolled and laid where feet will find them in the dark without thinking. A twig broom persuades the day's last dust into a corner that can be forgiven until morning. The volcano is exactly where it was at noon, which is to say, nearer than thought, farther than fear. It speaks a small syllable once, enough to make a spoon answer, and then it keeps its own counsel. No one thanks it. Gratitude here points sideways, toward jars filled before sunset, toward doors faced toward high paths, toward ropes that remember knots, toward children who can shoulder a basket without spilling a breath. If you listen as you sit on the step, you can hear the village rehearsing sleep. A goat mutters the end of a story to itself. A gecko edits a moth from the lantern's circle with a soft click. Somewhere a grandmother finishes a seam and bites the thread, making the air taste faintly of linen and effort. The square releases people back to their thresholds in 2s and 3s, like a hand returning beads to their bowl. And here is the 6th truth, set down without fanfare in the steam of a bowl, and the ash saved for morning. You would not last a day in a village beneath the volcano because you think rest is something that arrives when you stop. Here, rest is something you make, stitched from rinsed bowls and tied knots, from turned jars and slow songs, from doors that know which way to swing and lights that know how to be small. The mountain breathes. The village answers. Between them, evening holds steady like a bowl on a head, level because 1,000 practiced muscles keep it so. Night gathers itself like a shawl and lays across the slope. The square fades first, then the lanes, then the edges of fields where beans have learned to climb by listening to the wind. Amps shrink their flames until the glass remembers stars. Door cloths are drawn and pinned with thorns that know this job. In every house, a last ember is fed one small stick and then buried under ash, so it will wake in a good mood at dawn. The smell inside is a gentle braid, smoke, cassava, soap root from the wash, and the clean mineral note the mountain leaves on everything like a fingerprint. Mats unroll, not in a line, but in a logic that has been measured by years of feet at night. The grandmother's mat keeps the door on her shoulder. The children lie where the floor is most certain. In the middle, a dog placed like a comma between them and the threshold. The go basket waits by the door with its rope, blanket, tight pouch of cassava flour, tin of matches, smooth gourd stopper, the cloudy photograph. No one looks at it because no one needs to. Beddiness is a piece of furniture. A spoon rests in a glass near the map wall. Its bright, quick sound has become a kind of punctuation everyone understands without thinking. Beside it, the feather that tells the wind's manners lies at an angle that says ocean, not mountain. The charcoal lines on the map, paths to the ridge, the flat place, the turn by the old breadfruit, gleam where thumbs have reminded them to stay. The jars are counted with a fingertip, cloth caps are tied. A bowl near the shelf receives 3 grains of rice and a flower as at dawn. The words spoken over them have no verbs. They don't need verbs to keep their promise. Outside, night insects open their pages and begin to read. The first lines are small, crickets in the hedge, a gecko's neat clicks as it edits moths from the lamplight. Farther off, frogs keep river time, a slow metronome you can walk to in your head. A goat settles against the basalt wall and tells itself the end of its own story. Chickens make a soft cloth noise under their thatch. Somewhere up the slope, a stone lets go and taps its way down a gully like a thoughtful knuckle on wood. You lie down and the mat remembers you. The day loosens from your palms, the ache where a handle argued, the salt commas ash wrote along sweat at the temple, the memory of leaves under your fingers. The roof breathes. The thatch answers the small wind with the sound of paper being turned by a patient hand. From the hearth mouth, warmth leaks into the room without asking to be thanked. The mountain clears its throat once. The floor lifts and lowers like a sleeping chest. The spoon answers with a single ping, bright, brief, and is quiet again. No one sits up. Not because they are careless, but because this syllable belongs to the grammar of nights here. A mother pulls a cloth over a child's mouth and knows by habit, not fear. The cloth smells of sun and charcoal, the color of careful. The dog lifts its head, turns one ear toward the door and one ear toward the children, then decides it can listen properly lying down. In one house, a woman gets up without lighting a lamp. Her feet know where the lamp would be if she needed it. She steps around a bowl, reties a cloth over a jar, eases the door cloth an inch lower so wind has to ask permission. She stands in the doorway and tastes the air the way people taste soup, testing for too much salt. It tastes of wood smoke and a coin's edge of sulfur. She waits long enough to learn that the taste is not moving, then returns to her mat and the warmed place she left, a lesson given back to sleep. Dreams here have work to do. Children chase kites across terraces where the wind never drops the string. A boy's hands repeat the knot his father showed him until the knot ties itself. A girl walks the high path with a basket she can carry forever and never spill. The grandmother's dream is a ledger. Jars full, goats counted, grain measured in hands, 3 grains set, flour placed, door turned inward for ash, outward for rain. The mountain dreams itself as a kettle lid trembling on a quiet boil. In the dream it does not lift. A thin drift of ash passes as ash sometimes does. It arrives sideways like a whisper that isn't sure it wants to be heard. Door cloths darken half a shade. On the sill, a line of pale powder writes itself and then stops. No one coughs. Soap-root rinsed at dusk made the air inside easier to breathe. A grandchild, half awake, turns the feather's direction with a careful finger. It lies flat again, the way it should when the breeze remembers the sea. The child sleeps before their hand reaches the mat. In the square, a resin ember holds on, a small red eye under white ash. It throws no light, only the idea of light. A cat walks the wall and chooses a new doorway to keep warm as its duty. In the schoolhouse, jars rest on a shelf. Ash for the morning spoon, water with a reed that will confess if the floor moves before feet do, a feather for lessons that have nothing to do with reading. The teacher's chalk sits where it was dropped. On the board, the fishbone of stars someone traced at evening still glows a little with dust. Far off, farther than the next ridge, closer than the sky, the fumarole sighs. No one goes there by night. That is a daylight law. By day a stick tests, a hand hovers, a laugh sets an egg on the hot mouth for a joke. By night, the hill gets its privacy and people get theirs. The river talks to stones in a language sleep understands. a soft subtraction. Now and then routine wakes and walks. A man rises and steps into the yard to listen from where listening includes the ground, the wall, the breath of trees. He stands barefoot until the earth tells him what he needs to know. The small hum is still small. The wind still holds its ocean flavor. The goats have turned once and settled. He peels a star from the sky with his eyes and puts it on a notch of roof where he will measure it against the ridge tomorrow to know if the short rains are nearer. He goes back inside, lays the palm of his hand on the go basket's lid, feels the coil of rope remember its circle, and lies down again. The dog's ears consent. Cold is not an arrival here, but an opinion. It collects under the door and in the corners where the broom will find it at dawn. A shared blanket answers it without drama. A headscarf that kept ash out of hair becomes a pillow. A boy's palm under his cheek becomes a memory foam better than any shop could sell. Someone coughs and then doesn't. Someone shifts and stops because the floor has asked them to. When the moon climbs, the volcano wears steam like a thin scarf. If you step outside, quietly, with the door set back exactly as you found it, you can see the plume's edges change from white to silver to the color of breathing. Stars are a spill that no roof could catch. You look up and pretend to know their names. The names don't matter here. People count them by usefulness. Those 3 mean the weather will forgive planting tomorrow. Those 2 over the ridge mean the morning breeze will arrive kind. That one at the breadfruit's crown meant nothing to anyone until a child said it looked like a gourd. And now it is the gourd star and will be until the tree falls. Back inside, the lamp's glass cools to the air and beads with dew on the outside, proof that night is busy. The kettle's lid ticks as metal remembers its size. Somewhere a lizard runs the length of a beam and stops exactly where it meant to. The floor changes its mind and becomes part of your back without asking. Breath slows. The house listens and answers, rafters with small creaks, thatch with a soft shiver, a rope sighing along its nail. The noises sort themselves into harmlessness. Once, only once, the mountain speaks louder. Not loud enough to break, only loud enough to wake. The spoon pings twice. The dog is standing before the second ping finishes. The grandmother's palm has already found the child's hip. The mother has a cloth over her own mouth and knows without looking for it. The sound goes away like a sentence that forgot its verb. Someone unlatches and relatches the door, not to leave, but to make sure a leaving would be clean if it came. A minute later, the insects resume their book and turn the page together. The dog lies down, this time with its chin on its paws so it can hear the hinges dream. Sleep returns, not as conquest, but as treaty. The house holds it like water in a jar, lipped, measured, precious because it will be needed for work. The last thoughts are not about distance or danger. They are a list made by fingers on cloth. Jars, matches, thread, salt, doors, knots, paths, ash brushed from young leaves so stomata can do their secret math. The feather lying flat, the spoon quiet, the map glossy where a thumb has said remember. These are lullabies with no melody, only weight. Here is the 7th truth, set down without any need to raise a voice. You would not last a day in a village beneath the volcano because you think safety is a wall you build once and then sleep behind. Here it is a verb, performed in door cloths and counted jars, in practiced hands that can find rope in the dark, in the way a whole house breathes together when the ground clears its throat. Night does not erase the day, it carries it forward. The mountain breathes. The village answers. And between those breaths, people sleep. Dawn is not a line here. It is a slow unbraiding. Night loosens its grip finger by finger, the square first, then the lanes, then the ribs of terraces holding their breath under mist. The ember that slept all night under a blanket of ash yawns once and remembers fire. A woman leans close and breathes through a bamboo tube, 2 soft puffs, and a ribbon of flame lifts like a thought being finished. The first kettle ticks as metal finds its morning shape. Air slides from cold to almost warm. It tastes of damp thatch and wood smoke and the smallest coin edge of sulfur, less a warning than a signature. Dew beads the lip of the clay jar. A fingertip makes a clear path through it like a creek through fog. Somewhere uphill, a stone takes 2 thoughtful steps and decides to stay where it is. A rooster tries the grey. Another answers from behind the basalt wall. Dogs choose their first doorways. Inside, the house remembers its day body. Mats roll into ropes with sounds like quiet rain. Palm string ties them in knots that last the length of a morning. A broom of twigs persuades dust toward a corner that can be forgiven until noon. The go basket by the door does not need checking, and is checked anyway. Rope coiled into obedience, blanket folded to the size of calm, pouch of cassava flour hard against mice, matches rattling the way matches should, the gourd stopper turning with the smoothness of old habit, the cloudy photograph remembering faces better than names. A palm rests on the lid, good enough. On the wall, the charcoal map gets a wet thumb. The gloss along the ridge deepens. The path away from the old riverbed is reminded to hold still. Beside it, the spoon in the glass is quiet, a watch without hands. The feather that watches the wind lies at an angle that says ocean and keeps saying it. 3 grains of rice and a yellow flower find the shelf as they did at dusk and dawn, bookending a sleep with the same small promise. The words that accompany them have no grammar and all the meaning that's needed. The volcano wears a shawl of steam with the first color in it. Not red, never red by this hour, but pearl and apricot, the kind of light that makes leaves look like they have more veins than yesterday. A single tremor, the size of a cat stepping from sill to floor, travels through the boards. It is not news. News would be jars knocking. News would be the spoon writing its bright syllables twice. The spoon says nothing. The house breathes. You exhale without having meant to. The square wakes by pieces you could count if counting didn't feel like pinching. A pot upside down becomes a drum again, but softly, the way a heart begins before feet are asked to work. Pestles greet mortars with 3 polite thunks to tell the air that time has resumed. At the trough, water asks stone what it dreamed. The answer smells like eggs and green places and patience. Cloths that dried by lamplight are turned to face the first warmth. Children practice small errands as if they invented them. Carry this leaf, fetch that jar, find the dog's other ear. The teacher opens the schoolhouse and looks first to his shelf of jars. A spoon measures ash into its line of gray beads on the blackboard. Today barely a hollow in the metal, steadier than a hand could hope to draw. The water jar is still, the reed asleep. He nods to the room, which is a way of nodding to the hill. Chalk dust hangs in a pause before remembering how to fall. Breakfast happens like an answer to a question asked yesterday. Cassava cakes lift by a finger's width and are turned with a stick that knows balance. Plantains brown at the edges with a sigh that says yes. Porridge shifts from dull to shining when salt tells it who it is. A child tries to rescue a last piece into a pocket and meets the look that means rats read pockets at night. He eats. The pocket learns. The proverb keeps his teeth. By the river bend, women wring shirts over stone, the twist of their wrists writing the first sentences of work. One points her chin at the mountain, not in fear, not in scorn, just to include it in the conversation the day is having with itself. A man oils a knife with one drop and then teaches the drop to become 10 jobs. A girl takes a new length of palm fiber and braids it into a cord without watching her own fingers. The cord will remember for her. The village counts without numbers. It measures steam by the way it lifts or lies. It measures ground by the way bowls sound when set down. It measures wind by the feather's manners. It measures water by a lip left wet on a jar to be read at noon. It measures children by the ease with which they shoulder baskets. It measures you by how you flinch when boards lift and settle and how quickly your breath remembers to follow the houses. You stand at the threshold and the morning stands with you. The path upslope is already a ribbon of small intentions. Tools wait where tools wait, blade down, because sharpness is not a thing you put your foot on. The dog chooses to lead or follow according to whether you cannot detect. The breadfruit tree holds its carved fish in the right direction because someone always turns them to face the slope before the first bell. From the church comes the wooden thunk, 3 times, an honest sound that wants nothing. It does not call you, it does not excuse you. It says the hour is here. People answer by continuing. A reed pipe tries a scale and then decides against it. A laugh goes up lane and returns shorter, as laughs do in morning air. The mountain says nothing that needs a reply. And here is the 8th truth, the one the village does not speak aloud because it lives everywhere you look. You would not last a day in a village beneath the volcano because you mistake danger for drama and safety for a wall. Here both are verbs. Safety is lids turned inward and doors faced toward high paths. It is ash brushed from young leaves so they can do their secret math. It is a knot that holds and a map kept glossy by thumbs. It is jars counted by fingertip and a spoon that can write a warning in the dark. Danger is a change in the taste of water, a new pitch in the ground's small voice, a feather leaning the wrong way. People here read, not react. They practice, not pray for exceptions. This is not bravery as you imagine it. It is literacy. For them, this is home, a treaty renewed daily with rice grains and sweeping, with basins poured at the roots of bananas, with ember banked so it wakes kind, with stories told to keep edges smooth. For you, It is an impossible exam with no invigilator and no grade, only consequences. You count tremors and call it fear. They count jars and call it mourning. The day widens. Work will go back to the slope, to the black soil that swallows light and returns it as food. Children will recite rivers that do not look like their own, and then carry water the way rivers do, in the small of the back and in the bend of an arm. The teacher will add another bead of ash to the line. A grandmother will place 3 grains and a flower. Someone will oil a hinge. Someone will tie a red thread. Someone will touch the coin above a lintel to remind it of its post. And when evening comes again, as it always does, even here, especially here, the square will knit itself with smoke and song. The spoon will speak once or not at all. Lamps will shrink in politeness. The dog will lie where listening is best. The mountain will watch without blinking. The village will answer without raising its voice. So close your eyes. Let the hill keep half your breath and give it back when you need it. Hear the pestle marking time somewhere you cannot see. Hear the thin reed pipe decide on a tune and then forget it. Hear the wooden bell tell the hour an honest truth. Hear, far under all of it, the oldest sound you have learned here, the ground clearing its throat and then thinking better of words. Sleep is not a door you shut, it is a path you walk with practiced feet. Let the path carry you. Because the conclusion was always written in the ash and in the water and in the lines on the map, you would not last a day in a village beneath the volcano. And yet they have lasted generations, not by outrunning danger, but by reading the earth until it reads them back kindly. Let that knowledge settle over you like a roof that sighs when the wind runs its hand across it. The village will watch. The mountain will breathe. Between them you will sleep.